Salutations, respected viewers. It's George from Ireland here. So this video is about how Boris Johnson is boxed in on the whole Brexit issue. So Bojo became Prime Minister not quite 2 months ago, and as new leaders always do, he's got a bit of a honeymoon. Now his honeymoon is coming to a faster end than they ever do. So his popularity is reducing, but it's going to evaporate pretty quick because the United Kingdom is in a state of political paralysis. He has a 7% lead over the Labour Party. It's dropping. I think that they would be at neck and neck by Christmas, might flip the other way. Beyond Christmas, I won't project because so much could happen by then and now. Sorry, between then and now. So there are lots of things he can't do. Parliament has just passed this resolution to forbid him from taking the United Kingdom out of the European Union without a deal. And the European Union said, well, we're not going to offer you another deal. We offered you one last Christmas. You rejected it thrice, the House of Commons. So that's it. And what else? He can't call an election. Remember, Fixed Terms Parliament Act has to go 5 years between an election. The only way they can override that is either vote of no confidence and no government form within 14 days, or Parliament can vote by a 2/3 majority, House of Commons can vote by a 2/3 majority more accurately, to hold an early election, as they did in 2017. But Corbyn, a few weeks ago, was saying he wanted an early election now, bring together a more popular, broader government, sworn to prevent a no-deal Brexit. But now Corbyn says, no, the time is not right, we shan't vote for it. So that's it. The Conservatives, well, they had a majority of 1. That was including the Democratic Unionist Party, who were obviously given their confidence and supply arrangement. But then 21 Conservative MPs rebelled against the 3-line whip, or this resolution to prohibit a no-deal Brexit. Those 21 have had the whip withdrawn. That's not actually expelled from the party, okay? But proceedings can be entered in to expel them. I don't think it's going to happen, actually. It's ages since anyone's been expelled. You're expelled usually for like being sent to prison or something. But strictly speaking, they're not part of the Conservative Parliamentary Party, as in the group of MPs. And Amber Rudd, then she just jumped ship. She's left the party, saying would she stand as an independent Conservative, not a member of the party, or simply as an independent. She's musing. The speculation she'll join the Liberal Democrats, a former Home Secretary. So although she's only been in Parliament for about 9 years, she's a fairly big beast. The only woman who's a serious contender for the leadership and therefore the Prime Ministership a few months ago. So that's created a bit of a splash. So the Conservative majority is down to -1. There is no majority. They're a minority government, even taking into account the DUP on their side. Because remember, double effect, because you're taking 1 away from this side and adding it to that side. That's why it's not a difference of 1, it's a difference of 2 when she goes over to the opposition. She hasn't joined Labour or the Liberal Democrats or anything like that, but she is, strictly speaking, an opposition MP. Anyway, because she said she can't stand the way that One Nation Tories like her are being hounded out of the party. Well, she should stay and fight then. Moronic. Incidentally, Amber Rudd has got a wafer-thin majority in her constituency and could well be voted out next time. This is one of the arguments for not voting her to be leader and therefore Prime Minister. How humiliating would it be if the Conservative Prime Minister lost her seat in the forthcoming general election? In fact, that would have been highly improbable to transpire. People usually like being elected by, represented by famous politicians, as I pointed out, and the personal vote of a renowned politician tends to go up and up. Okay, so Parliament, part of that resolution, ruling out leaving the European Union without an agreement, also mandated Boris Johnson to request a further extension of the United Kingdom's membership of the EU up until the 31st of January. So, as I pointed out, it's not a foregone conclusion by any means the EU would agree to that. There are 27 other countries in the EU, and it only requires 1 of them to veto it. Surprising they agreed once, very surprising they agreed twice. Can you see a general election coming, says Paul Kelly? I can, but not yet. I think it'll be a couple of months now. The French president, Emmanuel Macron, he instantly said, we'll veto this. Even if the French do, somebody else could easily do so. Why should they agree? They are fed up to the back teeth of it. I'd be sick of it too if I were them, and actually, I'm bored rigid. I'm really, I've really had enough of the whole subject. Move on to something else. And the European Union has said, no, we will not offer to renegotiate. That's it. Take it or leave it. We offered that to you. We negotiated painstakingly and with no more concessions. Now, they might go wobbly on that one. They might offer some minor concessions, but don't expect a complete rewrite. Like Boris Johnson was saying, it was a virtual certainty he was going to get a new deal. Even if he does get a new agreement offered by the EU, it won't be hugely different from the one that they held out before. So, anyway, but these Remainers wouldn't like that. If Bojo, he asks for a no-deal Brexit, and he asks for an extension, and the EU says no, forget it, and the UK's out on the 31st of October. Well, can it be prevented? The United Kingdom can't stay unless the EU lets it stay, and the clock is running down. I mean, I'm just trying to think how many days there are now to go now. 55, is that right? So, he seems he can't get Parliament to agree to that offer. It still stands, the offer that was rejected 3 times earlier this year. The Labour Party, the Liberal Democrats, the SNP largely voting against, a handful of Conservative voting against, some of them ultra-Remainers, some of them ultra-Leavers. Most Conservative MPs voting for it, a handful of Labour people voting for it. I don't think a single Liberal Democrat or SNP person voted for it. SNP is Scottish National Party. Remember, the SNP's raison d'etre is to break up the United Kingdom. They want to take Scotland out of the UK and then have North Britain join the European Union as a separate member state. So don't call it independence. Independence within the EU is a contradiction in terms. Scotland being independent might be a splendid thing. Being a member of the EU could be an equally splendid thing. But you can't be both independent and a member of the EU. So make your mind up. Anyway, so what can he do? It seems that there's a state of political paralysis. He can't go forwards and he can't go backwards, and there he's stuck, increasingly impotent. And that's something an old libertine like him doesn't like to be. But I suppose they're leaving him one option, which is one he really doesn't want. That Article 50 notice that the United Kingdom activated in March 2017 could be withdrawn. The EU Notice of Withdrawal Act, I suppose, would have to actually be repealed by Parliament. I'm not sure he could do it. When Theresa May informed the European Union, we intend to leave the EU, and that gave 2 years. The clock was ticking, counted down, and that's why it's 31st of March, I think it was, 2019, the UK was supposed to leave, but obviously it's been delayed twice. Now Boris Johnson doesn't want to do that. He's a leaver. He campaigned for leave, and he said this is a do or die mission. So it was die if it's not completed, and if he turns through 180 degrees, he's in real trouble. But I'm not quite sure what happens if unstoppable force hits a movable object. If he's told that the United Kingdom can't leave without an agreement, and the EU says, well, you can't stay in. Can the Queen reject the new law? Well, no, she can't. But again, I suppose there's a convention, because the United Kingdom's constitution relies on conventions so much. The last monarch to say, I'm not signing it, was Queen Anne. She died in 1714. Other monarchs, however much they've detested a piece of legislation, have always signed it, even they consider it loathsome legislation. George III, he was the last monarch who would make very plain what he thought and vociferously advocate for or against certain policies or pieces of legislation. But even if they made him sick, he would still sign them. Okay, so they don't demur on that one. Okay, la reine le veut. The words are said out loud in the House of Lords. The Queen wants it, and it's law. It's been signed by that stage. They may be deselected, these 21 Conservative MPs who voted against Boris Johnson, who voted on this new resolution to say, number one, we can't leave without an agreement, and number two, you must request an extension. But now, why would some EU people want the United Kingdom in the EU, as it's been such a pain in the posterior? Well, it's the second largest net contributor, and every day the United Kingdom is in the EU, they're paying in. And obviously there's commerce in both directions, and there are lots of EU nationals in the United Kingdom. So obviously there is a serious chance of what won't happen. Well, I've been saying for months it's not going to happen, because the political elite have closed ranks, and they say we're hell-bent on preventing this, do whatever it takes. And obviously some of the British hardline Europhiles, they're in league with the other EU states saying, yeah, this can be prevented. We could just stop it. We could repeal that EU Withdrawal Act. and we could say we cancel Article 50. And the European Court of Justice confirmed this almost a year ago, saying if the United Kingdom withdraws Article 50, that's it, the UK can stay in the EU. It doesn't require the other EU member states to say we accept it. It's automatic. However, the United Kingdom can only do that if it unambiguously and permanently withdraws it. Can't say we're going to withdraw it temporarily whilst we faff around. No, no, no. You withdraw it, that's it. Northern Ireland only backstop could be spun as a proper Brexit to the Middle England and DUP. Sorry, I missed the rest of that comment. So yeah, what is the Northern Ireland backstop? Okay, so Northern Ireland is a portion of the United Kingdom. It has a land border with the Republic of Ireland. Republic of Ireland, we are staying in the European Union. And so obviously people are trading across that border every day, living in one, working in the other, and things like that. So people say, what's going to happen? Because if we leave without an agreement, what happens on trade? Your product here in the UK might not be legal in the EU meeting their safety standards, or vice versa. And we have some sort of common standards on labour law, on workers' rights and things like that, partly to make it a level playing field, but also supposedly it's better for the workers, things of that nature. And no tariffs. You're not taxed for bringing your cattle from this side to the other side. You're not taxed for bringing whatever is petrol from this side to the other side, as you used to be. So the backstop is how Northern Ireland would remain in regulatory alignment with the EU until and unless the UK and the European Union could agree an alternative. So that would be the default setting. So I've pictured the scenario. The UK leaves the EU and there's a backstop in relation to Northern Ireland. Over the next few years, the United Kingdom and the EU attempt to negotiate an alternative, but they don't agree. The UK thinks they have a good proposal, the EU says no, it's rubbish, or vice versa, in which case Northern Ireland would permanently remain aligned to the EU, abiding by EU regulations, despite the fact that no one in the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland, would have any input to these regulations, would be allowed to vote on them. Now, I don't think that's a wonderful situation, but it's better than the alternative of trade being messed up, of that ramping up tensions in Northern Ireland, of a possible return to conflict and things like that. And so it's one of the contentious parts of the agreement that was proposed by the EU. Johnson doesn't rely on the DUP anymore. Well, I think he does. I think he relies on them more than ever because he's already got a minority government of 1. It'd be a minority government of 21 if he split with them, and could easily be voted down in a vote of no confidence. And that's the thing is, why haven't they tabled a vote of no confidence? Because on the face of it, the Conservatives would lose, even if all the DUP voted for them. And some of the Conservatives so loathe Johnson and so detest Brexit, they would vote against him. Ken Clarke, for example, the father of the House, the longest serving male member of Parliament, has been there since 1970, non-stop. A man who was Chancellor of the Exchequer, Home Secretary, thrice tried to be leader of the party, always lost. So he would probably vote to bring down a Conservative government, especially if he thought he'd finally get the Prime Ministership. He was assumed to be past it. Or other people, a few of the others like Dominic Grieve might vote against their own party, Amber Rudd, although she's strictly speaking no longer a Conservative. So we live in interesting times. The whole system is in flux. You know, the cards are not being shuffled, they're being thrown up into the air. There are a lot of balls in the air, we don't know where they're going to land. So Jeremy Corbyn is wilier than I gave him credit for, because I thought, well, if you're a leader of Her Majesty's most loyal opposition, you should want a general election now, unless your party is in a very poor shape, because you want to get the Conservative government out. You're a Labour leader, you want the Labour government in. But he maybe think that his party's not battle ready, that actually he can destroy the Tories' credibility far more effectively by keeping them in office. To reuse Norman Lamont's phrase, in office but not in power. So they've been rendered rudderless. What are they going to do? And then people can focus on other issues. The pound keeps falling in value. Crime is fairly high. Boris Johnson's trying to recruit these 20,000 police officers. It'll be months before they're even recruited, and like over a year before they're even trained, and longer before people see an effect. The NHS is under pressure. You know, we have massive grade inflation in schools and universities. Okay, the situation isn't terrible, but there are problems on several fronts. House building is nowhere near keeping pace with the need for housing. You know, the average house costs 8 times the average annual income in the United Kingdom. In London, it's 11 times the annual income, bearing in mind that London's got much the highest income for the UK. So Bojo is stuck. What can he do? Now, can he defy Parliament and leave without an agreement? This is imponderable. There have been various legal challenges to his prorogation, all been thrown out by the courts. That would be judicial interference. This is a political decision. Yes, it's certainly within the Prime Minister's remit to do this. But anyway, the United Kingdom cannot stay in the EU unless the EU permits it to stay. But I think some people in the EU sense we could reverse all this. We have plenty of allies who are passionate in the United Kingdom about preventing Brexit altogether, and they would either say we're going to repeal that EU Notice of Withdrawal Act, or indeed we'll hold another referendum, and maybe the two options will be leave without an agreement or stay in the EU. Okay, and almost every Labour MP would campaign for Remain. All the Liberal Democrats would, probably all the SNP would. There are only a couple of SNP politicians campaigned for Leave last time. A lot of the Conservative Party would. Some of them were Remainers, still Remainers. Some of them were Remainers in 2016, said, okay, we lost. We accept the will of the people. Let's implement Brexit. That was a Theresa May view. That was a Dominic Raab view and Sajid Javid view and so forth, saying, or even Amber Rudd, that, okay, we accept the verdict of the masses and now we are duty bound to implement Brexit. But they could have said, we tried and tried and tried for over 3 years. It was an absolute nightmare. It's completely impossible. We need to accept that. Times have changed. It's just not practical. And new facts have emerged. Some of the things the Leave campaign turned out to be specious. And what else? So that they could change their minds back again. You know, events, dear boy, events. As Harold Miller would say, that's what really matters in politics. A week is a long time in politics, saith Harold Wilson. Well, it's over 3 years on. So the situation's changed. When the facts change, I change my mind. John Stuart Mill. So that's why it might not happen after all. The EU would sing hallelujah if the United Kingdom definitively said we're staying in the EU. Because they, woo, we still get the big subvention from the United Kingdom. Trade issues are sorted out. And it seems to prevent the possibility that more and more member states would leave. Supposing the United Kingdom left the European Union and then thrived and had lower regulation, became more affluent, was able to control immigration, and with the situation successful, other EU states with a significant Eurosceptic caucus, for example, Denmark, might say, why aren't we doing the same? And they would follow suit. And then if someone like Germany said, why on earth are we picking up the bill? Then the whole thing might be smashed to smithereens. Anyway, I don't think that's going to happen. So it would really cure their headache if the UK changed its mind. But if that were to happen, I think the European Union would then have a new treaty saying, by the way, member states, you're not allowed to leave. That's gone. That right of secession, we've got rid of that. That was written into the Treaty of Lisbon. It was a bit of a sop to Eurosceptic opinion, saying, vote for this as a sweetener. You don't really like it, but there is a silver lining to this cloud for you. If you don't like it, we make it explicit. You do have the right to withdraw. Before the Treaty of Lisbon, it was arguable that member states had the right to withdraw. I believe that they did. But from the Treaty of Lisbon onwards, there was this express right to pull out of the European Union. Anyway, so Boris Johnson, could he defy Parliament on this one? That it would be illegal. Now, this is what I find tricky. Isn't this part of his executive authority rather than it's a legislative power? It's an executive decision to sign treaties or not. And obviously leaving the EU is not signing a treaty. She gave that notice to Theresa May. There was an act of Parliament, the EU Withdrawal Act. Did she need that? Again, that's questionable. But executive power is sort of the royal prerogative exercised on behalf of the monarch by the Prime Minister of the day. And as I say, Boris Johnson can only get the United Kingdom to stay within the EU if the EU agrees to that. But I think they would. So what's going to happen in the next couple of months? So Boris Johnson is hoping that the EU offers him a more palatable deal, gets Parliament to vote for that. I don't think they would, more or less whatever it says. It's not really in the EU's interest to offer such a deal. Okay, then the UK could leave and trade could continue fairly uninterrupted, so it would avoid any disastrous consequences on either side. On the other hand, the EU might sense that they're winning, that they certainly got most British politicians on their side, and they got more of the British public on their side. Remember, 52% voted leave. The polls now show that only 45% would vote leave these days. Now, that might be underestimating the leave vote. Last time, the polls underestimated the leave vote by 4 percentage points. But even if the polls are 4 percentage points out again and out in the same direction, underestimating the leave vote, that means 45% in the polls saying they'd vote Leave. In reality, that'd be 49%. Even if it was that, Leave would still lose. And the demographics are tipping towards Leave all the time. Remainers on average are much older. They're dying off. They're not replaced by, Leavers are much older on average. They're dying off. Teenagers are turning 18. They break heavily towards Remain, like 75% towards Remain. So for all sorts of reasons, people could say, well, we tried and tried and tried our damnedest, and it was just simply was not practical. It was a mission impossible. So we have to admit that, stay in the EU, Project Fear can get going. You see all the damage this has done to the economy, but that's mainly because Remainers have obviously been doom and gloom merchants. All these Jeremiads have induced the feel bad factor, talking the United Kingdom down, spreading panic and despondency, and disseminating all these ludicrous scare stories about economic suicide and things like that, or we're going to have no food and medicine and nonsense of that nature. And unfortunately, a lot of people are dim enough to believe that. Other problems with this, apart from the pound going down, I mean, the pound going down up to some extent is a good thing. So I think that Remain would have it if they held it again. Now, there could be a vote of no confidence, to bring the government down. Would a new government be formed within 14 days? Well, the other parties could cobble together some sort of coalition and/or confidence supply agreement. Labour, Lib Dem, SNPs, even a faction of the Conservatives, those 21 have had the whip withdrawn. There's this new independent group for change, some of the moderate Labour and moderate Conservatives who broke away 6 months ago. It's fascinating. So we see that British politics are so vociferous these days. So there could be such a government. As I say, I think the price for that is often say, well, we won't serve under Jeremy Corbyn. We've got to have Harriet Harman, the mother of the House, a Labour MP, or Ken Clarke, or someone like that. Dominic Grieve, possibly Sir Oliver Letwin, former Conservative cabinet minister. I don't think it's going to be Jo Swinson because she's so new. She's a Lib Dem leader, very young, and obviously, well, she was a junior minister of the Conservatives. That then, if there were a general election, an early general election, the real wild card factor here is the Brexit Party. Now, they're mostly taking away votes from the Conservatives, and offering seats which are not that strongly held by the Conservatives, so deprive the Conservatives of quite a few seats. They would take votes away in Labour strongholds, but never enough, almost never enough, to deprive Labour of the seats, to mean that Labour doesn't win, the Lib Dems win, or Labour doesn't win, the Conservatives win, because they're usually taking votes away from the Conservatives. So that's that. They got 24% in the EU elections. They wouldn't get as much as in the Westminster election, partly because the electoral system for European elections favours these minor parties, which is why UKIP did so well. If the UK didn't have some sort of version of proportional representation, UKIP never would have got anyone to the European Parliament. We wouldn't really have heard of them. But obviously UKIP have been displaced as the major Eurosceptic party by the Brexit Party. So the Brexit Party would get 10%, something like that, probably not a single seat in Westminster, just like the UKIP only once ever got a single seat in Westminster at a general election, and that indeed was the former Conservative member for that constituency who defected to UKIP. So the Brexit Party will be kind of spoilers. Nigel Farage, leader of the Brexit Party, he's offering a pact to Johnson. Johnson is shunning it. It's beneath the dignity of a great party of state to enter into any sort of convention with an insurgent party like the Brexit Party. But if he doesn't, perhaps that's foolhardy, as in that will come in between him and the remaining in number 10. So Bojo, he's been dealt a difficult hand. I'm not sure if he's fumbled it. It's hard to see how you could play it better. So yeah, I think in a couple of months, maybe Labour say, ooh, the Conservatives have fallen in the polls, things aren't moving forward, aren't going backwards. We could have another general election. What if Brexit actually goes ahead on the 31st of October? They could force a general election. Brexit Party, DUP, Tory coalition. Well, the Brexit Party, as I say, will probably not get a single parliamentarian, so that's not going to work. We already have a DUP Tory confidence and supply agreement, and it's not working. Well, they just don't have the numbers anymore. Could the UK come back in, having left? Well, the Treaty of Lisbon provides for this and says, in black and white, if you leave, you're entitled to reapply for membership. Doesn't guarantee you'd be accepted. I think they'd be happy to get the UK back, but probably on worse terms, and you have to pay more, and things like that. And no more opt-outs for things, and you have to join the euro. It might be with conditions attached. But obviously, there's a large number of politicians, well, frankly, the majority in Westminster are Remainers of some stripe, whether absolute Remainers or moderate Remainers, There we have it. As I say, I think there'll be a general election before Christmas. There could be also a referendum. The smart thing to do is what you do in the Republic of Ireland, hold it the same day as a referendum on remaining in the European Union. Or what's the alternative? Accepting the deal that Parliament rejected 3 times, or leaving without a deal? Possibly 3 options in the referendum. You maybe rank them in order of preference, 1, 2, 3. So there we are. Bojo, things are running into the sand for him already. He's seeing that being Prime Minister is not really quite as easy as cracking jokes on Have I Got News for You.